We know vex enough. We know vex enough. Oh, we know vex enough. They insult us so much. I wonder why we know vex. They have pushed our every button. Oh, I wonder what is next. Monkey they walk, baboon they chop.
1212 Radio Culture. Monkey they walk, baboon they chop. Yes, indeed. Welcome to this week's edition of Weekend Editorial. As advertised, I have my special guest, Dr. John Osae Kwapong. First of all, let me apologize, the word I'm looking for the late start of the show.
I swear, this time
the pressure be too much, Charlie.
You say you'll be.
But yes, better late than never. We have the venerable Dr. John Osae Kwapong on the phone right now. And without much ado, because we have already lost so much time, we're going to go straight on the line and speak with Dr. John Osae Kwapong, fellow of the CDD-Ghana, and a very good friend of mine as well, full disclosure. Welcome to Radio Culture, Doc.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Doc. I know how busy your schedule is and everything, so I'm very appreciative of you waking up on a Saturday morning to speak with us. Thank you very much. So, Doc,
my pleasure.
Yes. Let's go straight into it. It's all about the president's recent reshuffle and matters arising. First of all, Franklin Cudjoe, right, who is the president of Imani Africa, has said that the reshuffle will have no impact on the economy. Bright Simmons, who is the vice president of research at Imani, also says the reshuffle doesn't seem to signal any clear political strategy. Do you agree to this? And did you see this coming at all? Did you see the reshuffle coming? Two in one question.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I think I didn't see the reshuffle coming, and that's because this president, I believe, holds a very different view when it comes to reshuffle. So over time, when the question of reshuffle comes, he sort of pushes back on it. And he has said that he doesn't believe in reshuffling for the sake of reshuffling. He also said, look, I am satisfied with the output. I regularly review the output of my ministers, and I'm satisfied with the output. So when you put those things together, then I wasn't surprised that he had gone 7 years without a major reshuffle of his cabinet or of his ministers. And so when the speculation was growing that, well, this time around the reshuffle is coming, I was quite surprised. But I do agree with Franklin that I don't see anything major happening as a result of this reshuffle. I look at it as, his administration has a couple of months left in office. Whoever is in a ministerial position is just to help the president safely guide, the ship to its end, its end meaning the end of the administration come January 2025. I don't see any major policy or major program of substance being enacted or implemented. So again, I don't see much changing with this reshuffle. Of course, you hope that none of these ministers, in whatever capacity that they've been placed in, would get involved or get engaged in anything that would cause any kind of headaches, for the president. Essentially, don't go rocking the boat. So don't go rocking the boat. Don't go get involved in where you don't want any issues, any headaches, any scandals, etc., etc. But on the substance of what is likely to happen with this reshuffle, I don't see much. It's more of, just ride it out for the next couple of months until our term of office is up.
So what
is what I see the president saying.
So what would occasion a reshuffle at all, if that's the case? If it's so obvious that there's not going to be any marked improvement in the economy, no marked political advantage here, what would be the motivation?
That's why I'm not sure. I mean, I know that there's been talk of some kind of political pressure on the president to, to do some sort of a government reshuffle, right? The General Secretary of the MPP is on record during their annual Thanksgiving, end of year Thanksgiving in December, saying that it would be good if the president would do a reshuffle. He was of the opinion that a reshuffle would help the party break the eight. But I just don't see a connection between the reshuffle and how that positions the party to win political power, or to at least to retain power come the December election. So I'm not sure. I honestly don't know why, in the last year of his administration, with a couple of months left, the president decided to do a reshuffle.
I see. And this is why we titled it the Extra Time Reshuffle. Because this, it looks as if, like, to draw an analogy to football, it's like playing the whole entire game for the 90 minutes, and then the strategy is to reshuffle, is to like substitute your players in the extra time. But anyway, so Freddie Blay and Kwadwo Mpieni, two very stalwart MPP, people, have said that this seems to be a bit too late in the day. And
yes,
if you ask me, the only news here is that it's coming from within the NPP and from such notable notable people. Otherwise, just like you said, that we don't really see. It's obviously a bit late in the day, but the news is that it's coming from these people. What do you think?
Yeah,
prompted them to come out?
I agree that it's coming. At least in my opinion, I believe that it's coming a bit late. It's coming a bit late because if the president wanted a reshuffle that would make a difference and have an impact, I would have thought that the time to have done it, for example, would have been 2020, right after the elections. So you've won re-election, you're going into a second term, you want to inject new energy, you want to reinvigorate your team, and therefore you do some reshuffle there, whether it is moving ministers from particular portfolios into another area, or even bringing new members into the team and letting existing team members go. However, I'm wondering if we were still in the midst of COVID, slowly recovering. Maybe he didn't want to change the team too much, because this is the team that was helping us manage through COVID. Another opportune time for me would have been when the results of the 2022 Afrobarometer survey was released. Because if you look at those results, the perceptions of the administration were quite abysmal compared to even 2019, when it had started declining, but particularly in 2017, where the perceptions were really high and very positive. I would have used that opportunity to shake up my team, to win back some of the political goodwill and political good graces that I believe the administration had, and a lot of it in 2017, which had declined by 2022. Those would have been the two critical junctures that I would have loved to see a reshuffle. But beyond that, I don't see how this one does any kind of turnaround, for the administration.
Okay. Now,
but
Doc,
there could be a reason for it that we don't know. But at least from my reading of it and based on some of the things that I've shared, I don't see this being an opportune time for a reshuffle.
Well stated. So Doc, the obvious elephant in the room, there were so many names on that list, but the one that stands out for everybody, Ken Ofori-Atta. Ken Ofori-Atta, who has been embattled for quite a while from unexpected forces, including from the parliamentary group from within his own party and everything. Now, finally, he has exited. At least he has exited the finance ministry. Metamorphosed in another capacity with at the president's office. But does Ken Ofori-Attah's exit signal any? How do you think the international community will read that, especially the lending agencies? What do you think will be their reading of this?
Well, he has been, he's been at the forefront of a lot of our international engagements when it comes to the economy, when it comes to our finances. He's been at the forefront of negotiating the IMF deal, as well as even this debt restructuring with our external, creditors.
Mm-hmm.
If he had exited completely, it could have signaled, some kind of, is there a loss of confidence, in him? Does that change the strategy for engagement as we go along? What happens to the IMF program? What happens to the agreements that we've ironed out with our external creditors, etc., etc.? I could see why some of these questions would come up. But at the same time, the IMF deal is done. Now we are just in the phase of implementation. We've cut a deal with our external creditors, right? It's just fine-tuning and going ahead. So you could also read it as, well, his work is quote-unquote done. So there's no cause, to worry. But I think there are reports from sources like Asase Radio that he's now going to be a senior advisor on the economy, and I think a special envoy to international capital markets. So, his presence would still be alive and well in this administration in the same key areas that his presence was when he was finance minister.
I hear you.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by that. The president has always expressed confidence in Mr. Ken Ofori-Attah. Even when he came under fire and calls to be removed, he once responded to a question from a reporter where he said, he has guided us after they took office, he guided us through COVID, and so he says, why would I remove him? Because at this point, I don't have any reason. He's been the steady hand that has guided my administration as we dealt with the economic challenges that we came to meet through COVID, etc., etc. So I'm not surprised that he would still play a role, in the administration because of how much confidence the president has regularly expressed in him.
So some read the whole thing as a face-saving move, right? That's bringing him back in another capacity, because this appears to be a demotion. From finance minister to some not so clearly defined portfolio in the president's office.
I don't think it's a demotion. He's still alive and well in terms of being substantively involved in this administration, right? You can look at the role as he's still the president's right-hand man, and trusted advisee on matters of the economy. And so I can see, and I'm not saying this is how it would play out, but I envision a situation where even when the current finance minister says something or recommends something with regards to, the economy, etc., that the president will still end up turning to Mr. Ken Ofori-Attah for his advice. So it still places him in a very central position to still have influence on the direction of the economy and the direction of the country's finances, or should I say the country's fiscal policy. So I don't see it as a demotion. He may not be finance minister, but he would still have the president's ear when it comes to the economy.
I see. Okay. Now his replacement, Mohamed Amin, relatively unknown. And I'm using relatively very advisedly, because when you speak of people to handle the finance ministry, the MPP could have paraded quite a list. And here we are with Mohamed Amin. Does that engender any confidence at all for, say, the bondholders whose money have been haircut, and all that, other stakeholders. Does Mohammed Amin's presence at the ministry now signal anything at all? Is there any ray of hope?
If I understand correctly, he's actually been a Minister of State at the Finance Ministry.
Yes.
So yes, and I also understand that he's a very well accomplished, quite an astute economist. I don't know much about him. I haven't followed his work much, but from what I've heard, he's always been at the ministry. He's always been very present over there. So at least you can guarantee that the ministry would be in quote unquote in good hands. As to how that translates into dealing with some of the issues that you've mentioned, the bondholders, etc., I think time will tell. And then again, the administration only has a couple of months left in office. So for me, it's more of how can you guide things safely and soundly and quietly between now and January 2025 when we exit the scene.
Or maybe the general thought is that they are breaking the 8, so that could also be the plan could also be for moving forward after December 7th. But anyhow, so all right, now some pundits have also noted that most of those ministers that were asked to step aside are ones that have lost their primaries in the MPP primaries, that have lost their spots in the MPP primaries. And the extension of that argument is that all the replacements for them seem to be people who are running for parliamentary spots. Do you see a connection there?
I think it does raise some questions, right? That you're an incumbent, you've lost your primary, so therefore, what's the way forward, or what's the point? But I'm really not sure if that factored into the president's calculus by relieving those said persons of their position. Unless of course in the background or internally there were conversations that went on that said if you've lost your primary, it means that you are a political liability to the party as the campaign heats up. And so we are better off relieving you now until you cause any more dissatisfaction or any more damage to the political fortunes that we hope to reap come 2024. On the face of it, it may look like that, but I don't have, I'm not privy to any other information that would allow us to substantiate that sort of perception or speculation that the move creates.
Okay, speculation could be a good thing sometimes. So let's do a little bit of that.
Right.
Let's do just a little bit of that right now.
Of course.
So going back to the first question about a clear political strategy, right? Let's try to draw a line between let's draw a link here. Do you think that the president, by doing so, and by so I mean by what we just discussed, asking people who have lost their seats to step aside, replacing them with people who are running for parliament, is that a strategy to back Dr. Bawumia's campaign?
Good question. Those who are running, right? Some of them could, for those who are running in, should I say, safe seats. I just don't see how you then. I don't see that direct line. It'll be interesting to see who is on the campaign team. From reports, Dr. Bawumia would announce his campaign team tomorrow. On Monday, right? So I would want to see what that campaign team looks like and what role that either the current nominees or those who've been moved around or even those who've been let go would end up playing a role on the campaign. I think once we see that then maybe we can begin further speculation into trying to draw a line between the actions of the president, the personalities involved, and whether, there's some benefits that it's, the party is hoping it could reap, politically for Dr. Bawumia's campaign.
Okay, so I'm going to stay on that for a little bit more, because there's this gentleman called Mr. Abraham Kumsin, I think that's his name, Abraham Kumsin, who is the Secretary General of the Ghana Federation of Labour, and he's on record as stating that Dr. Bawumia's recent speech, which some people see as a betrayal of Nanado, right, like a disengagement from his legacy and all that. And this gentleman says that forced the president's hand into the reshuffle. There are some on the other side who say that rather than the president being maybe pressured by Dr. Bawumia's speech, which some people see as a betrayal, he's actually rather, and this goes back to the point that I just was raising a short while ago, is doing this as a strategy to back the campaign. Which of these two scenarios do you see as more plausible?
Or maybe the president just did it because he's the president, he's the appointing authority.
Basically.
He can do a reshuffle. He can do a reshuffle whenever he wants to do
and his women
right?
caprice, yes, why not?
Right. But, on the point of distancing himself, from the president, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, I wrote about this in my most recent opinion in the Daily Graphic and for CDD-Ghana as well. Mm-hmm. The examples that have been used is, his decision to repeal the e-levy,
yes.
the VAT on electricity, and something. I think there were 3 examples that has dominated the conversation and has been used as examples of why they see it as the vice president trying to distance himself from mm-hmm. the president. Mm-hmm. I mean, I see those things as, look, there's nothing wrong with policy differences, even with your boss. Mm-hmm. And yes, I know it looks funny that, in the lead up to the passage of the e-levy and the heated debates that occurred, right, that the vice president never said a word. Mm-hmm. And now he has come out to say, look, if we are going to encourage a cashless economy and encourage people to use more electronic forms of payment, then you don't want policies in place that acts as a deterrent. Therefore, that is why I would repeal the e-levy should I be elected president. Now, the NDC, all the way back, I think in 2022, is on record for saying they will repeal the e-levy should they come into office. Yeah. But for me, those policy differences do not necessarily signal a distancing from the president. But having said that, one of the challenges that Dr. Bawumia faces as he continues to campaign is how do you share in both the successes and the challenges of this administration, right? Of which you served as the vice president. Yeah. And then, where does the president's record begin and end? And where does Dr. Bawumia's culpability begins and ends? Mm-hmm. If you notice, the NDC's campaign strategy is they constantly say the Nanado Bawumia administration. Yes. They constantly remind
bundle them together.
That yes. They constantly remind everybody that he was the head of the economic management team. Mm-hmm. So they would tie Dr. Bawumia to whatever record of performance we have seen under the MPP. Mm-hmm. And for me, I don't think it would be a good political strategy to try and sort of play it to say that, well, I was just vice president, it's Nanado's record, right? Mm-hmm. It's a team. And so I think teams share in both successes and challenges. I personally hope that he won't create the impression that he's trying to throw his own party and his own government, under the bus, because he would still need people in his own party, to vote for him. I don't think he's doing that, but I understand the tough spot in which he is, when, some, aspects of the record is not that enviable. And how much of that can it be placed on your doorstep too? And he's not the only vice president who faces that sort of dilemma, right? In other jurisdictions where vice presidents have, run for president, they are always reminded of the president's record. If it's a good record, it's easy to embrace it.
Yes.
If it's a challenging record, that is when it creates that dilemma for the vice president.
Yes, and it appears as if by the very act of trying to suggest that he has a different policy from his boss, that not just Dr. Bawumia, but the entire NPP party seems to be adopting a strategy without saying so much, but saying, okay, we understand that this is not a very sterling performance from this current government, but we're going to do better, and we're going to do better with Dr. Bawumia. My question there, though, is this: if Dr. Bawumia disengages from the successes or the failures of this government, and you just made that point, you cannot eat your cake and have it back, right? You can't say you're connecting with the successes and disengaging from the failures. But the question is this: if he's not going to align with or if he's not going to accept the failures, how is he going to campaign on any of the successes, if any, of this government? And if not, what would be the record that he's running on versus a John Mahama who has quite a litany of things to show?
Right. So if you notice, his speech spent some time talking about what he has been able to do as vice president. And so he gave quite a lot of examples around initiatives that he has done or has spearheaded in order to digitalize the Ghanaian, economy, or to digitalize the governance infrastructure. So I think if he stays away from, quote unquote, the successes and the failures of the Nana administration, that is how he would frame his campaign, right? Which is, look, even just as vice president, believing that to really move this economy forward, we have to infuse a lot of technology and digitalize it. Here are all the things of substance that I have done or contributed to in my role as VP. So now imagine the other things that I can do
when I'm president.
I am actually president.
The pushback.
I think that is how he would frame his campaign if he chooses not to talk too much about what the economy has faced.
Okay.
Yes,
the pushback to that, though, is that so for some people, Dr. Bawumia, who was packaged for Ghanaians as an economic waste kid, is not talking too much about economics, but going and now talking about digitalization. Also, for that, the challenge has come that the pushback, I should say, has surfaced that digitalization really is not his baby per se, right? The fiber optic cables and all that the infrastructure, I should say, that upon which the foundation of the digitalization is going to be built or is being built, was really not his baby like that. It was started ahead of him. He's just building on an existing legacy, if you will. And I'm not talking party legacy this time. I'm talking about a legacy of previous ministers, government functionaries who have laid down the infrastructure for him to build on as far as his digitalization thing goes. The other thing is this: some of the policies that he claims credit for, I cringe a little bit when I hear that. For instance, if I hear him talking about gold for oil, that to me personally is not an achievement at all. And that's another discussion that can be had. But I guess what I'm asking is, are these things enough for him to run on as president? First of all, digitalization, it's not entirely your baby per se. Secondly, some of the other things, gold for oil, I would rather not even speak about it. I don't think it's a very good policy.
So, I mean, he has to talk about things that he's done as vice president. And, even if it's things that he had to, he inherited a foundation or an infrastructure and build upon. He can't run for president by only talking about, quote unquote, a vision or the ideas that he has. I think voters would expect that even as he talks about the future and the kinds of things he wants to do, he should also substantiate that with things that he has done, particularly if you serve for vice president for, you would have been vice president for 8 years. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that is what occasions a lot of the examples that he provided in his speech, whether it's policies that he recommended or spearheaded, or whether it's efforts again that he did around digitalization, right? Even if some of those things, the foundation had already been laid, he needs a message, and that message has to be a combination of, I've done these things as vice president, whatever those things are, and then the second half of his narrative should be, and these are the things that I want to do. And so when you look at his speech, that is what he tries to do. He lists things he's done as VP, and then he shares ideas of things that he wants, to do, whether it has to do with taxes, whether it has to do with education, the economy, the creative arts.
Abolishing national service. I'm not sure what that's supposed to achieve.
Right. But he's offering ideas. And ultimately it's up to the voters to decide how they want to judge and weigh on those ideas.
All right. And we'll come to that in a second, talking of the Ghanaian voter, because let me not drink the soup while the fufu is being pounded. We'll come to that in a quick second. Something about the Ghanaian voter. But back to the reshuffle questions. So modernghana.com has reported that some of the ministerial appointees have actually refused to pick up the portfolios. Now, what is happening in the party? First of all, the party seems to be in a and I'm saying seems, I'm using my words very advisedly, seems to be in a position where they are kind of subliminally disengaging from Nanado's policy. He has even complained about that publicly, about people who go out and do not tout his legacy and all of that. And now we're also dealing with a situation where some people are like, oh no, all right, thank you. You offer me a ministerial position, but thank you, I don't want it. What does that signal?
So I think the one report that I read was the Honorable Kwapong, who was previously a deputy finance minister, I believe, and was offered. The report says he was offered a deputy ministerial position again, and from the report, he himself is on record for saying yes. He was offered it and he declined it. His argument was that he would be better placed in the legislature to continue in his role as MP, and that's where he sees himself being more effective than taking on also a deputy ministerial position. So that's his reason, right? I mean, I've not read the Modern Ghana report to see who else is declining the ministerial office. But you are not under any obligation to say yes to the president for whatever reason.
No, you're not. Except that it's quite strange that
yes,
it's not like he's saying that. Even using Kwaku Agyemang's example, right? It's not like he's saying that you cannot be deputy minister and still be a legislator. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of people, or quite a number of people, who are holding both roles. So that to me sounds like, it's not plausible. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Right. It looks odd, right? It looks odd that this would happen, but again, you are also not under any obligation to say yes to the president. I want to serve the next 10 months in a particular role. It will be interesting to see at least Kweku Kwate, from the reports that I read, gave his reason. If there are others who have declined, I'll be very interested to know.
To find out why.
Exactly.
I hear some of the reasons are that they want to focus on their campaigns as parliamentary, candidates and stuff like that. But mostly that, that's what some of them are saying.
I mean, that's a legitimate reason. They don't want to be bogged down by executive and legislative duties, whilst at the same time also trying to win an election, in a couple of months.
Yes. Doc, one feature that I think we should have seen, and I think that this was also mentioned by our good friend Franklin Kujo in when he spoke on this issue, was that what could have maybe signaled even the most infinitesimal, difference would have been the president merging some of the ministries, cutting some of them away, reducing the number of his ministers, all of that. Do you agree?
But again, what difference would that make in terms of the time led, except to show that, except to create the perception, right, that have cut down the size of government and have reduced the number of ministers, right? That for me is just cosmetic, and it's just politically cosmetic, because between now and the end of the year and when this administration leaves office, that won't make any major difference. I mean, if you're looking for a reduction that actually has substantive effect, it would even take some time for that effect to be felt. So anyway, who knows? It could have also been a legacy thing, right? To leave office, to say one of the acts that I did before I left office was recognizing that there's been quite a number of complaints about the number of ministers, and therefore I've merged some of the departments and I've cut down the number of ministers and let the next president take over from what you do now with that reduced, size of government. But you see, for me, and I know that the number of ministers has become a campaign issue.
Yes.
Former President Mahama says no more than 60. Yes. Dr. Bawumia says no more than 50. Mr. Alan Chemating says no more than 40.
Yeah.
I don't even know how those numbers are being arrived at. But for me, 40, 50, or 60, the real question is, what is the cost of government, right? Yeah. How much is it costing us, not just to have ministers, but how much is the entire government apparatus, costing the Ghanaian taxpayer? And so if you reduce the number of ministers, great. But when you put it all together, you've actually not made a dent in the cost of government operations, then that's just cosmetic. But I understand it's become a political issue, and therefore I can see why the main candidates want to offer and be seen as being responsive to that. But it's become, for me, a populist idea. When I think of it, I think of Republicans, right? And regularly, the whole idea of big government. But for me, the size of government cannot be looked at narrowly through just the number of ministers that you have in a government. The size of government is more than just that.
Okay. Now, last but one question, Doc. I know you have other things you need to attend to. So, the Kojo Oponkoma from the Information Ministry, he has been moved to a different ministry. Before he was moved, there were times when we needed to hear his voice as a information minister, and he was quite silent. Some read it as the government was becoming too difficult to defend, so to speak, quote unquote. So sometimes he didn't want to put his personal credibility on the line and would rather stay away from some topics. And now he's completely left the ministry. Kojo Oponkoma has run the information ministry since this government came into power. What do you read into his leaving the information ministry?
I don't know. I wasn't expecting him to be moved, and particularly to be moved to works and housing, right? I mean, he's become, the face and voice and the personality of the information ministry.
Yeah.
So that for me represented quite a curious move. But it's also giving, his deputy an opportunity to hold a ministerial, position. So who knows what occasioned the move? But like I said, when you hear of him or when you think of his name, you think of information ministry.
Yes.
So it's quite odd to see him somewhere else. But who knows why the president wants him in works and housing?
Okay, thank you very much, Doc. Now, before you go, I have seen a post concerning some research that you are conducting on the Ghanaian voter. According to a casual look at just the flyer that I saw, you said 83% of Ghanaians decide on who to vote for 6 months ahead of time.
Yes.
What else did you find in that research?
So this is research that Dr. Osae from Legon Political Science did in 2016. So what my research is now doing is to go back and look at all the other research related to elections that have been done, particularly starting around 2008 when we started getting more into this habit of doing polls and pre-election surveys, and putting it all together and saying, what are some of the things that we can begin to say we know this about the Ghanaian voter. So that's why you see that one that says, he asked, how long ago did you decide who you want to vote for? And 83% said, 6 months. The other thing, which I'll be, one thing that I can give you an insight to is the role of the vice president. Is the next thing that I will share from all the data that I'm pouring over. And overall, most people don't think that the running mate influences their decision in terms of who they want to vote
Interesting.
for. They are still voting for the presidential candidate. However, there are some variations. So in some regions, voters say it makes a difference. In other regions, voters say it doesn't make a difference. But I would be regularly sharing some of those things about the Ghanaian voter. It's very interesting what motivates or does not motivate the Ghanaian voter.
Amazing. I can't wait to get all that information. But just like you mentioned, I'm assuming that if you go to the north, for instance, that unspoken pact where southern based or people originating from the southern part of Ghana have this habit of choosing their candidates from the north. I think that definitely has some impact on how people would vote, right? Because at least they see their so-called their son, quote unquote, on the ticket, right? So it's interesting that you did mention that. Yes, there are a few variations.
Yeah, and real quick, if you look at the regional balancing that our two parties have been doing, so when the presidential candidate is from the south, they pick a running mate from the north. When the candidate is from the north, they pick a presidential candidate from the south. So if you look at the MPP, where they've had candidates from the south and therefore have picked running mates from the north, it's actually paid off. I call it a quiet revolution that nobody's talking about. But if you look at the MPP's political performance in elections in the 3 northern regions, well, now I think it's 5 because of the creation of the additional regions, they've been improving their performance. So that has really paid off. In the case of the NDC, the regional balancing hasn't paid off, especially, for example, haven't had a running mate candidate, for example, from the central region. Hasn't really paid off politically. But you're right, it's paying off very well for the NPP to have done that regional balancing with running mates from the north.
Thank you so much, Doc. Now, very final question. I promise this is going to be the very final question. So, the vice president spot for both two leading parties, MPP and NDC, has become something like a mystery to everybody. A lot of people who are following the politics of the NDC are wondering if John Mahama is going to retain Professor Naana Opoku Agyemang. There's a lot of talk going around also that it's most likely he's going to drop him for another candidate or another person. Within the NPP, there's a list of people who, mostly from the Ashanti region, markedly, who people are, putting taps on as potential vice presidential material. What is your guess? What do you think we're going to see within the two parties in terms of vice presidential, choices?
So, one thing is for sure, we know they will do regional balancing. So definitely,
for
John
both
Mahama
parties
will pick a candidate. So you know that. Let me put it this way: it's likely that they'll both pick their running mates, from the south. But they could do differently, especially the NDC. For me, because of everything that John Mahama said in the selection of Prof. Naana Opoku Agyemang as his running mate in 2020, I hope that he keeps her, right? He talked about integrity, the role of gender, a whole lot of very positive things.
She ticks a lot of boxes.
So for me, how do you go back and undo that narrative about why she was the best person to run with you and change her in 2024? Now, the political dynamics may be different, and therefore you may feel compelled to do that. But I really hope that he keeps that, because I think for me it sent a powerful statement about how seriously he took the role of gender and increasing women in our political spaces in an intentional way. When it comes to Dr. Bawumia, you've seen names. On social media, sometimes I feel like there's an active campaign to get him to select the Honorable Napo.
Opoku. Yes. It seems to be up there on the list.
It looks like there's an active campaign to get him selected. I don't know what he's going to do. I think if he looks south, maybe he may think, let me select someone from Ashanti region because it's our home base. We want to keep them very motivated and give them a reason to even go out more in their numbers. But I think this is one of those things where we would just have to wait to see what they do. And I don't know how soon they plan to do it, but I guess eventually we would know who they choose to run with. But like I said, from previous research, and now maybe 2024 may be different. But when Dr. Owusu Mensah asked that question in 2016, which is the only time it's been asked, the response were mixed. Overall, people were saying, it doesn't make a difference. Now, in some regions, they said it did. In other regions, they said it didn't.
Interesting. Doc, thank you very, 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 very much.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you so much. Every time I finish speaking with you, I feel like I've read a whole volume. I feel like I've read a whole book.
Thank you. My pleasure. Anytime.
Yes. And we'll be following that research very keenly.
Sure.
Don't be surprised that we'll come knocking at your door again very soon.
By all means.
For insights, as this is an election year and we need as much insight as we can.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Dr. John Osae Kwapong is a fellow of the Center for Democratic Development in Ghana. He's also, like I said, a schoolmate and a good friend of mine. So, there you have it. We have been discussing the last minute or the extra time reshuffle by the President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo. We will draw the curtains down on this one right here, and once more apologies that the show started late. We will have to draw the curtain down on this and reconvene next week on Weekend Editorial. But before we do that, I have just one simple editorial point to make. Nana Addo reshuffling his government at this time, as we've all stated, signals to me almost nothing. But there are still lessons to be drawn from this. The first of the lessons is this. Nana Akufo-Addo's style of governance seems to be almost esoteric, if you ask me. Like decisions that he takes are decisions that we cannot easily, decipher or try to figure out. Nana Akufo-Addo decided to build a national cathedral when a lot of Ghanaians were saying no, don't do it, but he will still go ahead and do it. And it's not clear what the objective is, even though he has stated a supposed objective. Nana Akufo-Addo would go and raise down a whole hospital at Labadi, raise it down. Now I'm thinking that if you want to replace the hospital, you could have done it one building at a time. You could have raised down one building, replace it, move on to the next until the whole hospital is replaced. Now you raise down the whole hospital and hasn't been replaced until 8 months for his presidency to end. So this is what I mean when I say his presidency, his governance style is almost esoteric. He has a style that is not easy for us to read into, and that applies to this reshuffle also. This reshuffle is a little too little too late, simply put, because as has been already stated, it does not bring anything much except that there's some political strategy behind that you and I cannot easily decipher, right? So that's about it, but we wait to see. Also tomorrow, Dr. Bawumia's speech, Dr. Bawumia coming out with his campaign team. Hopefully the campaign team will also include the announcement of his vice presidential candidate, and then we'll see how that goes. This, as we have mentioned, a lot of wind in Napo's sail to be the person selected for that slot. My question is, what exactly does Napo bring to the table? What's Napo's record as Minister of Education, as Minister of Health, as Minister of Energy? What exactly is his legacy? What is he going to sell Ghanaians outside of the Ashanti region? Within the Ashanti region, he doesn't have to do much. He doesn't even have to speak. I think Ashanti region has already made up its mind in terms of who should be vice presidential candidate, and that, for the most part, is Napo. And to be honest with you, it's not just the Ashanti region. I've heard people, within the MPP who are not from Ashanti region who think that Napo is the person who should be the vice presidential candidate. My question, I repeat, is what will he bring to the ticket? And by the way, what does Bawumia himself bring to his own ticket? Food for thought. My name is Kwesi Eson Bakon. I come in peace, I come not to please. Thank you for doing the listening. This has been Weekend Editorial. I'll see you next week, God willing, with another subject. Next week, we'll be hosting a panel of chiefs where we'll be discussing that mirage of a law, of a I don't know what to call it, that suggests that chiefs should not engage in partisan politics. Is it a good thing? Is it even real? Is it something that can be effectively that can be seen to like this is what I mean. Let me break it down. And I'm supposed to have been signing up, but let me break this thing down quickly. Ghana has this system where chiefs are supposed not to indulge in party politics. Yet we have chiefs who are sitting as what do you call them? Presidential advisors. The president's bodyguard is a chief. How is he supposed to stay away from partisan politics? We will discuss the rest of it next week. I don't want to put too much out here. Next week, please do make a date. I'll be hosting a Queen Mother from Ghana, a chief from Ghana, and another chief who lives here in the United States. It's going to be riveting. Do make a date. My name, once more, Kwesi Eson Bakon. I come in peace, I come not to please. Have a wonderful day and see you next week. Bye.
We know vex enough. Oh, we know vex enough.